Welcome to the Flip Conference. We are live once again, and we have another special guest. He comes from a different background that we have not spoken to yet, so I'm going to let him introduce himself, and then we'll pick his brain. So please go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi there, I'm Karim Vassanji. I am the head of digital strategy for Bayer Pharmaceuticals in Canada. So I lead strategy for the entire pharmaceutical organization.
No, that's incredible. So, like I mentioned, pharmaceutical, we haven't spoken yet. So, I want to pick your brain a little bit about that. So, given that in the pharmaceutical space, we've had a lot of conversations in terms of AI, but in terms of the pharmaceutical side, do you mind elaborating of how AI is disrupting that? What are you looking forward to? What has changed over time? So, yeah, I know it's a very broad question, but I want to pick your brain and just take it from there. So, I'll hand it over to you.
Absolutely. So a loaded question for sure. Um, the pharmaceutical space, as you know, goes from preclinical to clinical to commercialization, et cetera, et cetera. My focus is predominantly in the operations of the commercialization of products. So think of sales and marketing or medical and how we operate in that sense. Gen AI, not AI as a broad spectrum, Gen AI has a very potentially disruptive opportunity. I'm particularly looking at that not from a painful disruption, but from a scalability perspective. We're trying to increase the speed and augment how people work. We're also taking this as an opportunity to allow people to reinvent their jobs. So if people fear automation will take jobs away, today, fortunately, it's mostly tasks that are being automated, not people. So with AI, the way we're looking at it is, are we allowing people the space to understand the technology, create the competencies, and evolve with that? And of course, the return for the organization is that we operate more efficiently. We can increase our productivity, and the end ROI will always be positive. That's the expectation.
No, that's incredible. So that being said, I know we were talking about AI and the changes with that. Years back with the COVID-19, with that vaccine, when the pharmaceutical side, where it kind of was expedited that growth, do you think that also caused changes in the way you guys ran? Or do you think it was more that in that moment, everyone was just focused on that? Just thoughts in a general sense for the pharmaceutical space that something came in, changed and disrupted, and we acted very quickly. Did you think there were like lessons learned from that? Or how did that impact the pharmaceutical space moving forward?
That's a great question. That predates our AI investments in the broad sense of how we're investing, but it forced us to digitize analog processes. Like the pharmaceutical industry in the commercialization space, it has been a very much face-to-face type of engagement. So sales reps will talk to doctors, our MSLs will go and talk to doctors. Everything is done in the physical presence. So COVID forced us to think beyond what we were used to. It set a precedent. So as the technology continued to evolve, it was no longer disruption after disruption. For the most part, it's been increments after increments. So I think it was a very bad thing for the world. But as far as changing the mindset of how we operate, it was a shifting point for sure.
You know, that's incredible. And I love how you kind of looked at between AI and predated it. So that's amazing. And the lessons learned from that. But that being said, right now in the pharmaceutical space, what do you think are the biggest pain points or the things in the future that you guys are targeting or focused on now with all that is changing within the healthcare ecosystem at large?
There's a couple of things to consider, at least from my perspective. On one side, as you may know, there has been this paternalistic view of healthcare, right? The doctor in the middle, where there was a very big asymmetry of information. AI has changed that. Patients come educated, informed, sometimes one or the other. And as a pharmaceutical player in the space, and not just a particular company, but as an industry, we have to understand how that is shifting, how the products are selected, how they're made more appropriate for the patients that we try to serve. And so, in that sense, everything is different. The rules by which we play haven't changed, but the game itself has changed completely. So yes. Mhm.
No, that's incredible. Yeah. And so taking that and kind of bringing it to the Flip conference, I know you mentioned that's your first time attending it.
Yes.
And so that being said, based on your pharmaceutical background and the various themes, presentations, fireside chats that we've had, what has kind of resonated with you and given that the background and space you came from or things that you think we can address moving forward?
There's a number of things that I learned this morning. Some more confirmations of assumptions, but a lot of it was learning. One was the grass is not always greener on the other side. I think the problems that in academics or in the public health space the same problems that you face or that the public health space faces, we face on the private sector. We tend to address it differently because our mandates are different. Um, what I find that is missing or as an opportunity is how do we collaborate together? We have policymakers, we have researchers, we have technology vendors. And let's face it, the pharmaceutical industry plays an important role on how healthcare is delivered. And so this for me has been an opportunity to sit, learn, and also to think about how can we participate and co-create because this is the moment to co-create.
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's so true, and I think even with the mandate for the FHLIP conference, we call it the public sphere, is to bring everyone to the table,
Yeah.
and like you said, to how to collaborate. And I think we try to be very intentional, whether it's vendors, whether it's policy, hospitals, and we're very intentional about patients as well. And so I think to your point, I think it's a starting point at least to bring everyone to the table, have that awareness, like you said, it confirms some things for you, learn some
Yeah.
new things, right? So I think it's a starting point. So that being said, given the pharmaceutical background, what you've kind of come across at the FHLIP conference. Is there anything that you would like to share with the audience that maybe we haven't touched on that you think may be important or critical based on gaps that you've seen or anything in general that, and I'll keep it open to you. Yeah,
Yeah,
please.
I think I've heard a lot about technology
Mhm.
and us trying to digitize the system.
Right.
Some people have talked about the problems that the system or the gaps that we have in the system and how technology is addressing those. I was very happy to hear that policy has also changed in a way to support. I think this is the opportunity to really bring the patient to the middle.
Right.
We are very well focused on implementing things that help the clinicians and their workflows, and that's fundamental, right?
Yeah.
We can't do more with less.
Yes. Yes.
Um, but because the patient is playing a more important role now than maybe in the 10 years that have passed, we need to have an active voice and representation of patients in this sphere. So it's important that we don't assume that patients need A, B, or C, but confirm that they need A, B, or C. No different from how technology is built for clinicians without clinicians' input. And then we see that the adoption is low or that the friction is high. So I think that's really what I'm coming out of the conference and going home with is if we bring all the stakeholders, who are those stakeholders and what is it that we need from them to make this work in the future?
Yeah. No, that's true. I think that's a beautiful point that you raised where bringing everyone to the table is important, but what do you need to extract from them so that way you can move forward with X, Y, and Z? And the piece where you said about, focusing on the patient side as well. And I sound like a broken record. I say this all the time. We're all patients. I think we
Yes.
forget that when we always talk about it as third party or external. Everyone's a patient, maybe not today, but tomorrow, a loved one, all of us, doesn't matter your profession, your title. And so I think it's so important. And I'm glad you kind of noted that. So thank you so much
No,
for
thank you for
joining
the
us for our
invite.
conversation and sharing that and bring a unique pharmaceutical perspective, which we haven't had before. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really loved it. Thank you.